All right. Any questions, comments, concerns, grievances?
Nope.
Going okay.
Not at this time.
All right. If you don't feel like talking, feel free to put in the chat. I mean, the last assignment wasn't too. I'm definitely probably gonna have grievances on this next assignment. But I will be showing you. Wait, let me make sure. Okay, it's recording. Just want to make sure it's recording. Um. All right. So yeah, welcome to week 2. Just a reminder, like make sure you're reading the instructions for the discussions to receive all the points. Like sometimes I'm giving you prompts that are like very specific. And sometimes it'll be helpful like to restate the question. Sometimes I'm like, did they actually answer the question? But I try to give people the benefit of the doubt, so it's like not that deep. But I did want to go over just in case. Let's see. The method to the madness.
No.
Let's see here.
Don't do it. I don't know why you can't hear. Okay, the best thing to do is to get out and start over.
Wait, start over?
Yeah.
I just started.
Let's see.
Sounds like audio problems.
Purpose of, yes, I guess this is part. Alright, let me choose. So since this is like a quote unquote production modeling class, oops. Okay. Alright. So the purpose of this discussion is to like practice communication and be able to articulate your point. And the reason I think of this is like in the animation industry, sometimes when you're communicating with your coworker or your supervisor or something like that, it's very important to be able to articulate your point. And so that's why I have you do the discussion. That's why I have you respond to your classmates in a particular way, because also following directions. One of my colleagues, he talks about working on Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and there's that scene where the character is like kind of going loopy down the hallway, and when he initially turned that assignment in, he kind of did too much, and they were like, yeah, just kind of do what we asked. And so sometimes we try to like impress people, and sometimes a part of the pipeline is just like, we just need this shot to be this, or we just need this to be that. And so it's just like practicing. Are you like reading what the prompt is, or did you answer it properly? And because we're in an online environment, you kind of get to know people through the discussions as well. So it's like multi-purpose. And another reminder, particularly for this week, 3D is hard. If you're struggling with anything, feel free to reach out to me. There's absolutely no reason why you should know how to do any of this. This is why we're learning. I'm exposing you to things. Like, again, this is like an accelerated class, so I can't even take my time in introducing certain concepts, like if it was like a longer class. So I'm essentially just trying to teach you concepts that you don't have to be perfect on, because this is a beginner class, but I'm trying to teach you concepts that will help you in modeling more complex things the more you practice it. But you're not realistically going to learn how to do something perfectly in a week's time from watching, the YouTube videos or from even this Zoom. When you reach out I will ask that you kind of like watch all the resources. Like there's the instruction pages, so make sure you're reading everything and watching all the videos. Anytime there's an extras page, maybe just glance at that to see if I have the answer to your question over there. And then no. But again, you could just reach out to me. There have been times I can't force you to reach out to me. So if you rather spend like 4 hours on YouTube figuring it out, that's a personal decision. You could message me and I can answer your question in like 5 minutes, or whenever I get to it, obviously. But when I grade assignments, I'll sometimes leave I always should do this during week 1, but I never do. When I grade assignments, I'll sometimes leave a comment. If you want to engage with me on the comment I left, inbox me, because I do get the notifications about people putting comments, but Canvas doesn't make it easy for me to like just click and go to the comment, and it just like it's really hard to just be like as we get more assignments, because not everybody does the assignments in real time. Sometimes people do them late, and so being able to be like, okay, this is this student, this assignment, this class, like it's just easier for you to respond to me in inbox if I leave a comment. Yeah. Also, just in case you're not familiar, let's see. Click. Oh, all right. Let's see. I just want to show you how to. If you use, for those not familiar with like the multiple ways you can use the YouTube videos, one of the purpose of the YouTube videos is that I want to introduce you to a lot of different instructors online, because there's a lot of information out there, but not all of it is good information. So I've looked through hundreds of videos and picked the good ones that teach you how to like do things properly. And when you're done with this class, if there's a particular instructor like person who you like, I like how they teach, then you can subscribe to them, and at least you know what the good information is, so that if you find other videos you're like, I don't know if this is good information. That won't be perfect because you're a beginner, but maybe that'll help. But also, while you're watching the YouTube videos, sometimes they go too fast, so if you're not already familiar, you can slow the videos down. This cogwheel in the lower right, you can press the settings and then the playback speed, and you can slow it down to 0.75, 0.5, 0.25. Also, if you're not used to following YouTube tutorials, if it's like a step-by-step thing, feel free to like, they do one step and then you pause it and then go do it in Blender and then come back. Some people like keep the video playing, which if you have a pause button, feel free to use it. So yeah, those are just some tips on watching YouTube videos. Any questions thus far? Okay, let's see here. Week 2, we're on shape language, pushing and pulling points. So you have your 3 pages of instruction, you have your quiz, you have your discussion, and then our assignment for this week. The purpose of this assignment is to display your ability to push and pull components. We learned about components in, I believe, was that week 1 that we learned about components. So if you go back, let me just make sure. Yes, so our components are vertices, edges, faces, and then we have the whole object. So this week we'll be going into edit mode. That's how you get access to the vertices, which are the dots, the points, and then the edges is, the side, the line that makes up the corners, and then the faces are a plane that has 3 or more sides. And then up here we have our triangles which is our three-sided face, our quads, or sometimes we just call it a face, which are four-sided, and then our n-gons are 5 or more sides. The thing, like, when you do if you just do your side project, it can look, as long as it looks good when you render it, it can look however you want. But in this class, I'm going to be trying to teach you to use like all four-sided faces, and that sometimes is just beneficial once you use certain tools like the edge loop tool. Sometimes when you have triangles or n-gons, it'll not work properly. Now, just to make sure, like, I encourage like all quads. That's typically a thing that's encouraged, mostly in production. Once you're into like freelance, more people don't care. But minimal tries. I don't mean 0 triangles, but just like minimal. And never having n-gons is a good thing to do. Like any face that's 5 or more sides, try not to do that. So again, we're trying to push and pull components, use no tools that have been introduced, and build on using the transformational tools to create shapes that look like reference images. So the tools that we're using, we learn how to move, rotate, and scale. We're going to be extruding, duplicate. I don't know how much you use duplicate, but like loop cut and bridge loops, bridge as loops. You're going to have to pick one from each category. So you have to pick one easy, one medium, and one hard. A thing that a lot of students do that I explicitly tell you not to do somewhere on here. Do not try to match the look of the reference image, like these images, by removing edges. Do not do that. This modeling, like, this is just a rendered image, and this is actually from like a freelance job that I had. And I had to make it look like that at the output, but you don't have to delete all the edges. In my demonstration, I'll be showing you that as well. The look, like this look of the final image from above, is achieved through texturing, and we haven't gotten to that skill yet. So this is not the construction, this is the final render. So I understand that it looks like a certain thing, and it looks like edges are not there, but they are there, and I don't want you to delete them. And I'll go over this again when we get into the demonstration. Don't add any materials or textures. We're just doing modeling. And then you have, like, I'll show you how to import reference images, but you also have those videos here. Make sure that you follow these instructions. These instructions will be pretty much important for the rest of the class. Submitting a packed Blender file. So I thought I had an image. Do I have? Is it on the next page? Yes. So right here, this image, you will have like reference images, like how once I show you how to import them, but the file name is on your computer. So when I open it on my computer, it'll look all pink, and I won't be able to compare what you modeled to the reference image. So that's why you have to submit a packed Blender file, because it puts all the images in the file, and so I can see which reference images you used. I can see how closely your model is to the reference images, and that helps me grade. So please, if you have, like, it doesn't give you like now your Blender file is packed, but like if you just do what this says, then you should be good. And I suggest you do number 2. So if you just have this thing checked, it's packed. And like on the first, like if somebody like doesn't submit a packed file, I'll just, mostly in the future, I'll just ask you like, can you resubmit it? And then you won't like, you'll get the same points as if you had submitted it on time. I don't take points off because I ask you to resubmit it if that happens, but I would love you all to get into the practice of packing the files for this class. Um, and your rubric, so you'll get 10 points for each problem, and then and hopefully I get to it. I will show you how to use collections. There is a video on it if I don't get to it, but the idea is to use one Blender file. Don't do 3 separate Blender files, because you're learning how to use a collection, which is kind of like a folder or a layer, so that you can create your easy, and you can hide the collection that has your easy stuff in it, and then now you can't see it, and then you create your medium, and then you create your hard. And so I'll show you how to do that. And yeah, pretty much, yeah, emphasis on one Blender file. And again, this will make more sense in the demonstration, but does anybody have any questions about any of that? Okay, so again, your assignment this week is to do keyhole problems. You're going to be using X-ray mode. I'll be showing you how to, edit mode, X-ray view, importing images, loop cut, extrude, bridge, merging vertices, and the knife tool and collections. So last week we did the snowman, and you pretty much stayed in object mode. In order to get into edit mode, you can either go to the top left here and go down to edit, and then you'll have access to vertex mode up here in the upper left next to edit mode. So this is vertex, it's the dot. The line is edge mode. If I click that, it's now edges. And then, if I click this, I'll select the different vertices. So that's vertex mode. If you want to select multiple, you should hold down shift, and you can hold down shift until you're done and select those. Edge mode. So this is the different edges. And then if I wanted to do multiple, I hold down shift. And then face mode is the different faces. And so if I wanted to select multiple, just hold down shift. Okay, so I did. I put a box around that. I don't know why I didn't do the bottom. But in previous versions, it required you to go into X-ray mode. But either way, if you're just like selecting a bunch of stuff, it's a good habit to like, okay, let me confirm. Okay, I didn't select that. So it's not good to like, oh, I selected all of this stuff and I confidently think I selected it. No, like, let me do this, make sure. Oh, I didn't? Okay, good. Now I do. So that's a good practice to have, to ensure that you, like, even if it was like a bunch of vertices, if you add like this head, a human head, and you're like, oh, I want to select all the vertices, you just want to kind of make sure that you did by rotating around. And that can save you a lot of headache in the future. This, because of us using reference image, the contextual views that we talked about, where if you wanted to emulate the numpad, go edit it, preferences, input, and emulate numpad. And if you don't have a debug mouse, you can emulate your debug mouse as well. And 1 is the front, 3 is the right, and 7 is the top. I would encourage, like, when you were to press 1, it will be really good for this to actually be the front image and not be like the side image. And then if you were to press 3, it would be good for this to be the actual side image and not like the front image or anything. And then typically students are good with the top one. So as far as importing images, let me see. I gotta find. Why is it not connected to my other computer? Construction. Assignment. That's not what I'm looking for. Let's just pick one of these. I'm gonna choose. Let's choose one of these. Okay, I'll choose this one. All right. Turn the screen. So, if I was to be in perspective mode and I was to either go to add image reference right here, or the way that I mentioned last week, Shift A is a shortcut to make the add menu pop up, and go to image reference, and then if I was to choose a reference image, which one did I want to choose? This one. It will insert it perpendicular to the camera. So now it looks like that. So we want to make sure that our camera is where we want it to be to properly import our reference image. So I'm going to Control Z that. I'm going to go press 1 for the font orthographic, and then I'm going to try that again. Shift A, image, reference, and yeah, that's the font. So I imported that one. Typically, I suggest, like, I'm looking at my reference image, I rotate a little bit, not a lot, and then I use my move tool, and I'll move that back. Let me actually bring in the other one first because I want to scale it up a little bit. So I went to 3 to go my right orthographic and Shift A, image reference, and this is the side view, and then I'll do the top 7, Shift A, image reference, and this is the top view. And so now they're all at the center line, and I can like select all these and deselect the cube. I did that in the outliner by pressing Control and pressing the cube. And then sometimes you want to scale it up. You feel free to do whatever you want, but if you want to easily scale it up, I just rather have all 3 images, and I can select them all at the same time, and then just press S so that they all have the same resolution, and they're all the same because they're all matched up as far as size. So I don't want to like make each one a different scale, because then that will mess up when I'm modeling. So I just scaled those up a bit just to show you how to do that. If I go back to the front, I pressed 1 to go to the front. Did I not install the screen cast on this computer? Cast keys, background, and let's see. Mouse size, make that bigger. So if I press different things, that A is like really small. Let's see. Font size. Let's see. 33. Okay, that's big. Yeah, so as I'm like, I'll still say what I'm doing, but it's good to be able to see it too. Okay, so I pressed 1 to get into the front orthographic, and so sometimes I open up the file and people's stuff is all on top of each other. I'm like, this is a terrible way to model. Like, don't do this. So 1, and I just rotate a little bit, and then I move it back. I rotate enough to see the green arrow or the arrow that I need, and I just push it back. So that if I'm going to press these eyeballs on the outliner so I can see. So I can just see, like, no matter how far it is in space, it's still going to be the same resolution once you go into the orthographic views. You could have it closer if you just kind of wanted to see it like closer or whatever, and you're not maybe going to use the orthographic views that much or something. I don't know, but you can have it closer. But I just kind of move it out the way for my workflow. If I bring back the side one, so sometimes people like they'll do this and then they'll just kind of move it wherever. But like when I'm grading, I'm like, okay, now it's in front of the object, and it just would just be much easier if you just move it the other way. Oops, that scaled it. So again, I just like do the number, and then I just rotate a little bit, and then I scale it away from myself. And then for the top view, let me bring that back. I do that. I mean, we kind of know where the bottom is, but I can move it that way so that anytime I press the orthographic views, my model is in front of it, and that's going to help me when I'm actually doing an assignment. Again, I told you all, like, I personally, for my personal workflow, like to see my wireframe on top of things. It kind of helps me with the construction. You can kind of do what you like. As I'm talking, if you want to ask a question in the chat, or if you just want to kind of shout out audibly, it doesn't throw me off, so feel free to do that. And it's a good practice to rename stuff. So this is going to be, I can't remember which one I chose, but let's just say this is easy 03 or something. And then this one is, I'm just double clicking to rename it. Easy 03 front. Easy 03 side. And easy 03 top. And as we can see, like when we open Blender, it has the scene collection. It already has this collection for everything in our viewport. If you want to create a new collection, what you can do is right click, I'm over the outliner, I'm right clicking new collection, and I can call this Easy 03, and then I could just shift select this stuff and drag it into this collection, and that's my organization. And so once I do all my modeling and I'm done with easy and I want to move on to medium, all I have to do is click this eyeball, and then I can now import my stuff for the medium. Please remember that this eyeball is for in the viewport, this camera is for in the render. So say you have your easy, medium, hard, and you do like click that eyeball, it's still going to render. So you might be like, why is it rendering like stuff on top of each other? It's because you still have it accessible in the render. So once you do your 3 renders, you want to do the camera, turn the camera off for each collection. And it once it's in a collection, it does it for everything that is in the collection. So you don't have to just go and like individually turn all these off. They're all in the collection, and you can click and drag. You don't have to click individually. But if you're having a collection, just one click and it's done. So any object and outliner, let's bring this back. So typically, I try to choose a shape that best fits what's in my reference image. This is going to play a part in multiple assignments that we have. So just make sure you're choosing a shape that closely fits. If I was making a column, I would probably do a cylinder. If I was making a basketball, it would be a sphere, so stuff like that. If I go to the front, I'm gonna, in the upper right hand corner right here with these 2 squares on top of each other, I'm gonna go X-ray. The shortcut is Alt-D. I'm gonna do that. And first, before I try to like cut up anything or use any like of the new tools from this week, I try to match the overarching shape. So I'm going to tab, so we can go to this drop down and do edit mode, or the shortcut is tab on your keyboard. And I can, whether I want to do the shortcut keys or use the gizmo, typically whatever feels comfortable for you. Like you're gonna, as you continue, you'll find like a bunch of YouTube videos, or people are like, oh, you should learn the hotkeys, or you should, whatever is comfortable for you. Because if you keep chasing how other people do things, it'll make it harder. Just chase what is comfortable for you. It doesn't matter how other people do it. If you can get the same outcome as them, it's okay. Like, you don't have to model how I model. If you can figure out a way to create something and it still looks how it's supposed to look, and it's good, it looks good, you did it. So this is the front. The side, I'm going to do SY. And then 7. So in this case, the object doesn't match up perfectly with the top. I would never move the object. I would always move the reference image. Sometimes people move their objects off of the origin, and you should always have your objects on the origin. Like, at least while you're modeling. Obviously, when you're doing multiple objects in a scene and stuff, you'll move some things. But for this assignment, like, I'm just gonna move the reference image because I already have it fit to the front. I already have it fit to the side. So if I move it at the top, it'll mess up my matchup with either the front or the side. So it's just easier to move the reference image. So I'm gonna move this over. Oops, accidentally right clicked. Move this over to make it fit. And then while I'm modeling, I would want to lock my reference images so I don't actually accidentally click them or anything. How you do that? Well, we only have our eyeball and our camera right here. So the way you can lock things is I'm going to go to this funnel. If you hover over it, it says filter. And then grayed out is this directional arrow. And so as we hover over it, you can see it says selectable. So I'm going to click that to make it blue. And now it shows up in the outliner. And so I'm going to just click off for each of my reference images. Now, if I try to click on them, I can't. So that is very helpful. Sometimes you will accidentally move a reference image and like, oh, no, it's not perfect or something like that. But you just don't want to accidentally move something that you're not meaning to move. So now only I have my cube. So if I look at the front end, I can see for this side, I'm gonna have to take a chunk out of this area. For the side, I'm gonna have to do some like pushing and pulling of points. And for the top, this is essentially the shape I am going to have, so I don't have to really do anything according to the top view. So I'll typically go with, okay, this is kind of the easiest thing out of the front or the side. So I have my object mode. I'm going to tab into edit mode. And the loop cut tool is what we're learning this week. The loop cut tool, it inserts edges into your mesh. And so if I press, let me go to this, so I don't have the gizmo in my way. Right now, I see that the sides here are taken care of, so I don't have to worry about that. But I have these two edges, vertical edges right here. So that tells me that I need two edges to match up with that. So I'm going to do Control R for insert edge loop. If I haven't clicked yet, I'm just hovering, because if I go away, it won't show me the yellow line. If I hover over my object, I see this yellow line, and this is the one edge loop it'll insert if I left click. If you have a scroll wheel, I can scroll up, and now I have two. Don't worry if you don't have a scroll wheel, because you can fix that later. But I scroll up, I need my two edges. They're not perfectly aligned, but that doesn't matter because I can move them later. And then once you left click, that's not the end. So left click, you can still move it side to side. So if you want to place them in a particular place, you can feel free to do that. For me, I'm just going to right click to put them perfectly in the center. If you do not have a scroll wheel, typically when you do an action in the lower left are these dialog boxes. I can click. Okay. If I click, this is where if you don't have a scroll wheel, you can change the number of cuts here. So if you have one and you're like, oh, I need two, you can just click, and you can left click and then right click and then come here to the dialog box, and you can increase the number of cuts you have. So no worries. If you need to do something, do it immediately, because once you click off, it's not coming back. If you don't do too much, if you just kind of click once, pressing F9 brings it back. But if you do too much clickety clacking, it's gone. So you might have to Control C. So I'm going to select these. I'm in X-ray mode, so I know I selected it all the way through. I do want to make sure that I'm selecting like multiple things at a time, because I don't want to move. It's work smarter, not harder. You don't have to move one vertex at a time. I can just group things. And then I'm going to like scale this out. Like some people, you might be like, okay, I can move this one over here. And then I can move this one over here. But as a professional, I'll scale them so I can do it at the same time. So SX and scale that out. And then I have this piece right here. So that tells me I need another edge right here. So I'm going to do Control R. And you typically hover over a perpendicular line. So if I want this to be horizontal, I'm hovering over the vertical line. If I want it to be vertical, I'll hover over the horizontal line. So I'm going to hover over this line, left click, and I can just move this down to where I want it to be and click again. Work on. You have a question? If you're talking, I can't hear you. I heard you earlier when you were in here. I can't hear the question that you're asking. You can type it in the chat if you can, or if you go down to the bar at the bottom with the Zoom bar and try to kind of click audio and see your audio settings and see why I can't hear you or something. But I can't hear you currently. But if you type your question in the chat, I can answer you. So I did that horizontal line. If I go to the, make sure I'm on Blender, not Zoom. If I go to 3, you can see that this horizontal line is going to help us with this curve right here. And so we're not moving anything at the top, but it is giving us more information. So we can see at the top, the 2 lines that I inserted, they're right here, so that's cool. And then we have this other line going across. So in the top view, I will do that. Control R and left click, right click, and insert that line. So if I go back to the side, that line is going to help us create that peak. So we're just kind of like looking at all the construction. And as beginners, this is not something like it's theoretically easy, but it's something that you're going to have to learn how to do, of like looking at a object and being like, okay, this is where I need an edge right here, this is where I need an edge right here. And particularly as you go to the like medium and hard, it'll get, you know, more difficult. So this is what we have thus far. If I go to 1, I can just clear out this section. So something, when we're in face mode, we see these black dots, so I could just kind of put a selection box around the black dots, and that's going to go all the way through. And when we're in face mode and we're deleting faces, if I press X, it's A-okay to delete faces. I'll show you really quickly. If we're in edge mode and for whatever reason we want to delete an edge, when we go to X, we do not want to delete edges. We want to dissolve edges. If I control, and you see that edge went away, I control Z and I do X, delete edge, it just takes away this whole thing. So faces, yes, we can delete faces. So if I go to X and I want to delete a face, I can do delete face. But if I do an edge, I want to dissolve it. And then if I go to vertex mode and I want to get rid of a vertex, I want to go to X and I want to dissolve vertices. So if we control Z and we go to X and we delete the vertex, it just removes the whole thing. So dissolve vertices and edges, delete faces. Okay, just gonna show you all of that real quick. So there's like multiple ways I could tackle this. Like one way, I'll do, let's do this. I'm gonna Shift D and move this over. So there's multiple ways you could tackle this. Both ways are correct, as long as it gets you what you need it to do. So if I was to tab into edit mode, I'm going to go to edge mode. I can select this one, and because it's going to go down the same distance, I can select these edges right here, and I'm going to extrude. Extrude takes an edge and it pushes it down. Let's see. Oh, it pushes it down. It creates new geometry. So if I press for our extrude, what we're learning this week is the shortcut is E. Oh wait, let me make sure I'm back in Blender. E, and it kind of moves it anyway, and I can adhere it to a axis. So I haven't left clicked or anything. I just pressed E and I just move my mouse around. If I press Z, then it adheres to that. If I right click, let me kind of control Z. Okay, I just want to make sure, like, be careful with extrude because sometimes you can extrude, and then if you right click, it's still there. And so now you have two edges on top of each other. So, you know, just be careful with doing like things like that because you can have a lot of geometry on top of each other. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, because I want to make sure it snaps to this corner when I extrude it down, so I wanted to make sure I turn on my snapping up here. So this magnet, I'm going to click that, and then I click the drop down right next to it, and vertex. You could choose, once you get used to it, you could choose multiple of these, but I'm just going to choose vertex because that's going to be the easiest way. So this is going to allow me to snap to a vertex. So if I go back and select these, I'm going to press E and then Z, and then I'm going to hover over the vertex that I want to snap to and left click. Now, this is not when you're done. You still, because if we move this up, it's still not together. So we want to make sure our stuff is together, and that's where we learn about the merge tool. So I'll show you really quickly. If we do the drop down, I'm doing this viewport overlays drop down, and I'm clicking statistics, and it'll show me like all the vertices, edges, and faces that I have. This is helpful. I'm going to go into X-ray mode just to make sure I'm selecting everything I want to select. I'm going to go to vertex mode. If I put a box around this, it'll show me, yes, I have two vertices. I want one, but I have two. So it's like, okay, I did the extrude, I snapped it, but it still needs to be connected. So the way we do that is press M for merge, and we can do at center because they're on top of each other, so it'll just do that. If I put a box around it again, oops, I have one. All right, so now let's go over here. I have two, but I want one. I can do, well, let me do the merge at center, and then if I select these two, if I do Shift R, that repeats the last command, so it'll merge again, and then this one, Shift R, merge again, and so that's how I did that. And then another tool that we're learning is the bridge edge loops tool. That's how we can close this hole. It'll bridge two edges. It will put a bridge, like a face, in between the two edges. And so I can select these edges and I can do multiple at the same time. You can't get too complex with this bridge edge loop tool, but they're just two edges across from each other, so it should be simple enough. I'm going to go to edge, bridge edge loop. You can set your own key, hotkey for this, but native to Blender, there's no hotkey. So edge, bridge edge loops. And so that's one way I closed it. And then the other way that I could do it, if I come over here, tab into object mode, select the object, tab into edit mode. I can select these two. I can do bridge edge loops, and then I can control R, put my edge loop right here, and then I can select these and do bridge edge loops again, and then select these and do bridge edge loop Shift R. So I did it in multiple ways, but if it gets me what I need to get, it's right. It doesn't matter how you thought, oh, I did it wrong. Like, no, you did it right. If you got what you needed to get, you did it right. So if I go to The front, I got what I need for the front. Let's go to extra. Let's go to the top, and then let's go to the side. And so I still need to get this shape. So I can see according to what my reference image, the section that's closest to me, that part needs to be like a triangular shape. So that will be this section. So you're kind of deciphering the reference image. And what I will do to this, the easiest way I'll do this is I'll select this first, and then this vertex first, and then this vertex second. And then when I press merge, I'll merge at last. So again, I did this first, this last, M for merge, merge at last. So if I do this one first and then this one last, I'll merge at first. So it's like which one did you choose first? And then this one, and merge at last. If I choose this one first and then this one, and merge at first. So if I go back to 3, I got my one section, and then I need, if I look at the top, this section, you see, this line goes all the way through, so that's our peak. This line stops, so that means a chunk of this is gone. So I can delete this part, and this part, X, and we can delete faces. Oh, this part. So I have that, and then it needs to go down and snap to get this shape. So the easiest way I can do that is to vertex, click that, merge at last. Merge at last. Oops. Nope. Merge at last. And then the only thing I need to do, bridge edge loops. And now I have my shape. So I got the front, I got the side, I got the top. And so before you like turn it in, before you decide you're done, you're like trying to just examine like, okay, do I have everything? And particularly once you get to the medium and hard, you want to like, okay, is everything good? Does anybody have any questions for anything that I did?
Yes, one sec. I'm sorry, I missed where we received these references. Where do we find that?
To the assignment page.
Okay.
So that's page 2.4. Click. Please, why is my mouse? Okay, on page 2.4, keyhole problems, and you can download the zip files.
Oh,
So you
okay,
just
thank
gotta
you.
select, you like look at them, like okay, I can do this one, and then just download one easy, one medium, and one hard.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep. And a quick thing. Let's see, if I select this object, not sure if this will be beneficial to you in this assignment, but if I click this edge and if I press GG, it'll slide on the object. So if I just was to press G, it just will move anywhere, and G is the shortcut for grab or move. But if I press GG, it's like an edge slide tool. So might need that, might not. Let me turn off snapping.
So do we need to dissolve the edges?
No, that's what I was saying earlier.
I mean, not edges, but the okay, so you leave those. All right.
Yeah, like that's what I was saying earlier. This is rendered. This is not construction. So don't feel like you have to be like, okay, now I got to delete this edge. No, just construct it. If the shape is correct, that's how it's supposed to look. Don't delete any edges after this.
Okay.
There's like
Or not, I didn't mean delete, I meant dissolve. We don't dissolve them.
No, we don't get rid, because this is how it, if I was to open up this file, this is how it would look.
Okay.
This is a render. This is not. This is a final product. This is not the final product.
Got it.
If I click here, there's a. Let's see, if this works. Yeah, there's a. Control Z. So, if for whatever reason you need to I need to separate this. There's a rip tool. There's a video on my instruction about this, and the shortcut is V. And so I could just select this vertex, press V, and I just need to open this up for whatever reason. You might need to do that. You might not. If I do V, you can't kind of control where it goes, but it might be useful. It might not be. Let's see. Importing. Pretty much did everything, and then if I'm done with the easy, and I could just put my wait. Oh, that's the actual object. If I do that for the collection, now when I go into medium, I'll do my little new collection from medium. I do medium 02. And then I do 1, and I shift A. I want to be in object mode when I do this. Shift A, image, face, and then I bring in this one. Then this is how you do your second one. You don't have to do 3 separate Blender files. That's the purpose of learning how to do collections, is that you will have the organization, because that's what you'll be grading on as well. So you do the process over for medium, and then do the process over for hard. Let's see. Does Blender work best with a mouse and keyboard? I've noticed Shift A doesn't bring up the same menu for me as it was similar but not exact. I might have a. Oh wait. I think because so I have. I might. I don't think I. Let's see. Mesh. Extra. I don't even have extra objects, because sometimes when you have extra objects, I don't know. Oh, you might have a newer version. How does it look different?
I'm just seeing less options when I hit Shift A, but I'm thinking it might be because I'm on a Mac, or
It shouldn't matter. What option? When you look at mine, what options don't you have?
I don't have that image one, which is the one you were.
Are you in object mode?
I'm in edit mode.
Okay, change to object mode.
I see. Okay, you're right. I see it now.
Cool. Any other last questions? Hopefully that's helpful. Rakan?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just missed out on the beginning.
This is recorded, so I'll be uploaded. I sorry I didn't record last week. I did. That's the first time ever teaching this class that a class was not recorded.
Yeah.
But this will be recorded, and so you can look back at it.
Okay.
Did you tell you how to get to the recording?
How do I get to the recording?
So let's see. I'll be uploading it hopefully tonight. And I go to, this is the modules page. We have the second module, and at the end of every week it has the recording section. So I'll swap this text out for that. I'll embed the YouTube video of the recording in there.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions, comments, concerns? My inbox is open. Feel free to inbox me. I would rather you do that than spend hours trying to figure out yourself because you just don't have the information to figure stuff out. Sometimes if you like mess up royally, just start over. Because even if you're like quote unquote failing, it'll actually go easier the second time you do it, to be honest. That's typically how it goes. So if you're just like, oh my God, this is the point of no return, just start over. All right. Again, I hope that was helpful. See you in the inbox. See you on Canvas.
Right, thank you.
Thank you.